Right, this is the translation, Alain de Botton, The Consolations of Philosophy, New York Vintage 2000. Happiness and Acquisition List. 1. A neoclassical Georgian house in the center of London. Chelsea, Paradise Walk, Markham Square, Kensington, southern part of Campbell Hill Road, Horton Street. Holland Park, Aubrey Road, in appearance similar to the front elevation of the Royal Society of Arts, designed by the Adam Brothers, 1772-4, to catch the pale light of London afternoons, large Venetian windows offset by iconic columns, ionic columns, and an arched tympanum with anthemions. On the first floor drawing room, a ceiling and a chimney piece like Robert Adams' design for the library at Kenwood House. A jet stationed at Farnborough or Biggin Hill, a Dassault Falcon 9000 or Gulfstream 4, with avionics for the nervous flyer, ground proximity warning system, turbulence detecting radar, and a Cat 2 autopilot. On the fin tail, to replace the standard stripes, a detail from A Still Life, a fish by Velasquez, or Three Lemons by Sanchez Cotan, from the fruit and vegetables in the Prado. The Villa Orsetti is 3 in Marlia near Lucca. From the bedroom, views over water and the sound of fountains. At the back of the house, a magnolia della Valle growing along the wall, a terrace for winter, a great tree for summer, and a lawn for games. Sheltered gardens indulgent to fig and nectarine, squares of cypresses, rows of lavenders, orange trees, and an olive orchard. 4. A library with a large desk, a fireplace, and a view onto a garden. Early editions with the comforting smell of old books. Pages yellowed and rough to the touch. On top of shelves, busts of great thinkers and astrological globes, like the design of the library for a house for William Inn of Holland. 5. A dining room like that of the Belton House at Lincolnshire. A long oak table that seats 12. Frequent dinners with the same friends. The conversation is intelligent but playful. Always affectionate. A thoughtful chef and considerate staff to remove any administrative difficulties. The chef adept at zucchini pancakes, tagliatelle with white truffles, fish soup, risotto, quail, John Dory, and roast chicken. A small drawing room to retire to for tea and chocolates. 6. A bed built into a niche in the wall, like one by Jean-Francois Blondel in Paris. Starched linen changed every day, cold to the cheek. The bed is huge. Toes do not touch the end of the bed. One wallows. Recessed cabinets for water and biscuits, and another for a television. 7. An immense bathroom with a tub in the middle on a raised platform, made of marble with cobalt blue seashell designs. Taps that can be operated with the sole of the foot and release water in a broad, gentle stream. A skylight visible from the bath. Heated limestone floors. On the walls, reproductions of the frescoes on the precinct of the Temple of Isis in Pompeii. 8. Money sufficient to allow one to live on the interest of the interest. 9. For weekends, a penthouse apartment at the tip of the Isle de la Cité, decorated with pieces from the noblest period of French furniture and the weakest of government. The reign of Louis the 16th. A half-moon commode by Grevenich. A console by Saunier. A bonheur du jour by Van der Cruz Lacroix. Lazy mornings reading Periscope in bed. Eating pain au chocolat on Sèvres china and chatting about existence with and occasionally teasing a reincarnation of Giovanni Bellini's Madonna from the Galleria della Accademia in Venice, whose melancholy expression would belie a dry sense of humor and spontaneity, and who would dress in Agnes B. and Max Mara for walks around the Marais. An anomaly among an often pleasure-hating and austere fraternity, there was one philosopher who seemed to understand and want to help. I don't know how I shall conceive of the good, he wrote, if I take away the pleasures of taste, if I take away sexual pleasure, and if I take away the pleasure of hearing, and if I take away the sweet emotions that are caused by the sight of beautiful forms. Moment. Epicurus was born in 341 BC on a verdant island of Samos. What's Pythagoras? A few miles from the coast of Western Asia Minor. He took early to philosophy, traveling from the age of 14 to hear lessons from the Platonist Pamphilus and the atomic philosopher Nausiphanes, but he found he could not agree with much of what they taught, and by his late 20s had decided to arrange his thoughts into his own philosophy of life. He was just said to have written 300 books on almost everything, including on love, on music, on just dealing, on human life in 4 books, and on nature in 37 books. Though by catastrophic series of mishaps, almost all were lost over the centuries, leaving his philosophy to be reconstructed from a few surviving fragments and the testimony of later Epicureans. What immediately distinguished his philosophy was an emphasis on the importance of sensual pleasure, for pleasure is the beginning and the goal of a happy life, asserted Epicurus, confirming what modern thought and the philosophy had rarely accepted. The philosopher confessed his love of excellent food. The beginning and root of every good is the pleasure of the stomach. Even wisdom and culture must be referred to this. Philosophy properly performed was nothing less than a guide to pleasure. For the man who alleges that he is not yet ready for philosophy, or that the time has passed him by, is like the man who says he is either too young or too old for happiness. Few philosophers have ever made such frank admissions of their interest in a pleasurable lifestyle. It shocked many, especially when they had heard that Epicurus had attracted the support of some wealthy people. First in Lampsacus, in the Dardanelles, and then in Athens, and had used their money to set up a philosophical establishment to promote happiness. The school admitted both men and women and encouraged them to live and study pleasure together. The idea of what was going on inside the school appeared at once titillating and morally reprehensible. There were frequent leets from disgruntled Epicureans detailing activities between lectures. Timocrates, the brother of Epicurus' associate Metrodorus, spread a rumor that Epicurus had to vomit twice a day because he ate so much. And Diotimus the Stoic took an unkind step of publishing 50 lewd letters, which he said had been written by Epicurus when he had been drunk and sexually frenzied. Despite these criticisms, Epicurus's teachings continued to attract support. They spread across the Mediterranean world. Schools for pleasure were founded in Syria, Judea, Egypt, Italy, and Gaul, and the philosophy remained influential for the next 500 years, only to be extinguished by the hostility of forbidding barbarians and Christians during the decline of the Roman Empire in the West. Even then, Epicurus' name entered many languages in adjectival form as a tribute to his interests. Oxford English Dictionary, Epicurean, devoted to the pursuit of pleasure, hence luxurious, sexual, and gluttonous. Browsing the newsagent in London 2,340 years after the philosopher's birth, I came upon copies of Epicurean Life, a quarterly magazine with articles on hotels, yachts, and restaurants, printed on paper with the sheen of a well-polished apple. The tenor of Epicurus's interest was further suggested by the Epicurean, a restaurant in a small Worcester town, which offered its clientele, seated on high-backed chairs in a hushed dining room, dinners of seared sea scallops and cep risotto with truffles. The consistency of the associations proposed by Epicurus' philosophy throughout the ages, from Diotimus the Stoic to the editors of Epicurean Life, testifies to the way in which, once the word pleasure has been mentioned, it seems obvious what is entailed. What do I need for a happy life is far from a challenging question when money is no object. Yet, what do I need for a healthy life can be more difficult to answer when, for example, we are afflicted by a bizarre recurring headaches or an acute throb in the stomach area after evening meals. We know there is a problem. It can be hard to know the solution. In pain, the mind is prone to consider some strange cures: leeches, bleeding, nettle stews, tree panning. An atrocious pain pulses in the temples and at the base of the head, and then the whole cranium has been placed in a clamp and tightened. The head still feels as if it may soon explode. What seems intuitively most necessary is to let some air into the skull. The sufferer requests that a friend place his head on a table and drill a small hole in the side. Then he dies hours later of a brain hemorrhage. If consulting a good doctor is generally thought advisable, despite the somber atmosphere of many surgery waiting rooms, is because someone who has thought rationally and deeply about how the body works is to likely arrive at better ideas and about how a healthy person than someone who has followed a hunch. Medicine presupposes a hierarchy between the confusion of the layperson will be in about what is wrong with them and the more accurate knowledge available to doctors reasoning logically. For doctors are required to compensate for their patients' lack and at times fatal of bodily self-knowledge. At the heart of Epicureanism is the thought that we are as bad at intuitively answering what will make me happy as what will make me healthy. The answer, which most rapidly comes to mind, is liable to be as faulty, for our souls do not spell out their troubles more clearly than our bodies, and our intuitive diagnoses are rarely any more accurate. Tree painting might serve as a symbol for the difficulties of understanding our psychological as much as our physiological selves. For man feels dissatisfied. He has trouble rising in the morning and is surly and distracted with his family. Intuitively, he places the blame of his choice of occupation and begins searching for an alternative, despite the high cost of doing so. It was the last time I would turn to see inside an ancient Greek town. Deciding rapidly that he would be happy in the fish business, the man acquires a net and an expensive stall in the marketplace, and yet his melancholy does not abate. We are often, in the words of the Epicurean poet Epicurus, like a sick man ignorant of the cause of his malady. It is because they understand bodily maladies better than we can that we seek doctors. We should turn to philosophers for the same reason when our soul is unwell, and judge them according to similar criterion. For just as medicine confers no benefit, it does not drive away physical illness, so philosophy is useless if it does not drive away the suffering of mind. The task of philosophy was, for Epicurus, to help us interpret our indistinct pulses of distress and desire, and thereby save us from mistaken schemes for happiness. We were to cease acting on first impulses, instead investigate the rationality of our desires according to a method of questioning close to that used by Socrates in evaluating ethical definitions over 100 years earlier. And by providing what might at times feel like a counterintuitive diagnosis of our ailments, philosophy would, Epicurus promised, guide us to superior cures and true happiness. Those who had heard the rumors must have been surprised to discover the real taste of the philosopher of pleasure. There was no grand house. The food was simple. Epicurus drank water rather than wine, and was happy with a dinner of bread, vegetables, and a palmful of olives. Save me a pot of cheese so that I may have a feast whenever I like, he said to a friend. Such were the tastes of a man who had described pleasure as the purpose of life. Then he had not meant to deceive. His devotion to pleasure was far greater even the orgy accusers could have imagined. It was just after the rational analysis he had come to some striking conclusions about what actually made life pleasurable. And fortunately for those lacking a large income, it seemed that the essential ingredients of pleasure, however elusive, were not very expensive. Happiness, an Epicurean acquisition list. 1. Friendship. On returning to Athens in 306 BC at the age of 35, Epicurus settled on an unusual domestic arrangement. He located a large house a few miles from the center of Athens in the Melite district between the marketplace and the harbor at Piraeus, and moved in with a group of friends. He was joined by Metrodorus and his sister, the mathematician Polyaenus, Hermarchus, Leontius and his wife Themista, and a merchant called Idomeneus, who soon married Metrodorus' sister. There was enough space in the house for the friends to have their own quarters, and there were common rooms for meals and conversations. Epicurus observed that of all the things that wisdom provides to help one live one's entire life in happiness, the greatest by far is the possession of friendship. Such was his attachment to congenial company, Epicurus recommended that one never try to eat alone. Before you eat or drink anything, consider carefully who you eat or drink with, rather than what you eat or drink. For feeding without a friend is the life of a lion or of a wolf. The household of Epicurus resembled a large family. But there was seemingly no sullenness nor sense of confinement, only sympathy and gentleness. For we don't exist unless there is someone who can see us existing. We say that what we say has actually no meaning until someone can understand. While to be surrounded by friends is constantly to have our identity confirmed. Their knowledge and care for us have the power to pull us from our numbness. In small comments, many of them teasing, they reveal that they know our foibles and accept them, and so in turn accept that we have a place in the world. We can ask them, "Isn't he frightening?" or "Don't you ever feel that?" And we can be understood, rather than encounter the puzzle, "No, not particularly," which makes us feel, even when in the company, as lonely as polar explorers. For true friends do not evaluate us according to worldly criteria, as is the core self that they are interested in. Like ideal parents, their love for us remains unaffected by our appearance or position in social hierarchy. And so we have no qualms in dressing in old clothes and revealing that we have made little money this year. The desire for riches should perhaps not always be understood as a simple hunger for a luxurious life. A more important motive might be the wish to be appreciated and treated nicely. We may seek a fortune for no greater reason than to secure the respect and attention of people who would otherwise look straight through us. For Epicurus, discerning our underlying need, recognized that a handful of true friends could deliver the love and respect that even a fortune may not. Freedom. Epicurus and his friends made a second radical innovation. In order not to have the work of people they didn't like and answer to particularly humiliating whims, they removed themselves from employment from the commercial world of Athens. For we must free ourselves from the prison of everyday affairs and polities, and began what could have been best described as a commune, accepting a simpler way of life in exchange for independence. They would have less money, but would never again have to follow the commands of odious superiors. So they bought a garden near their house, a little outside the old Diplon gate, and grew a range of vegetables for the kitchen, probably bliton, cabbage, cromyon, onion, and canaro, which is an ancestor of the modern artichoke, at which the bottom was edible but not the scales. The diet was neither luxurious nor abundant, but was flavorsome and nutritious. As Epicurus explained to his friend Menoetius, the wise man chooses not the greatest quantity of food, but the most pleasant. Simplicity does not affect the sense of status because, distancing themselves from the values of Athens, they ceased to judge themselves on a material basis. There was no need to be embarrassed by bare walls and no benefit of showing off gold. Among a group of friends living outside the political and economic center of the city, there was, in the financial sense, nothing to prove. 3. Thought. There are few better remedies for anxiety than thought. In writing a problem down or airing the conversation, we let its essential aspects emerge. And by knowing its character, we remove, if not the problem itself, then its secondary aggravating characteristics: confusion, displacement, and surprise. There was much encouragement to think in the garden. As Epicurus' community became known, many of the friends were writers. According to Diogenes Laertius, Metrodorus, for one, wrote 12 books, among them The Lost Way of Wisdom, of Epicurus' weak health. In the common rooms of the house, the Melite, and in the vegetable garden, there must have been unbroken opportunities to examine problems with people as intelligent as they were sympathetic. Epicurus was especially concerned that he and his friends learned to analyze their anxieties about money, illness, death, and the supernatural. If one thought rationally about morality, one would, Epicurus argued, realize that there was nothing but oblivion after death, and that when there's no trouble when it arrives is an idle worry in anticipation. It was senseless to alarm oneself in advance about a state which one would never experience. There is nothing dreadful in life for the man who has truly comprehended that there is nothing terrible in not living. Sober analysis calmed the mind. It spared Epicurus' friends from the future furtive glimpses of difficulties that would have haunted them in the unreflective environment beyond the garden. Wealth is, of course, unlikely ever to make anyone miserable, but the crux of Epicurus' argument is that if we have money without friends, freedom, and an analyzed life, we will never truly be happy. And if we have them, but we are missing fortune, we will never be unhappy. To highlight what is essential for happiness and what may, if one is denied prosperity through social injustice or economic turmoil, be foregone without great regrets, Epicurus divided our needs into three important categories. Of the desires, some are natural and necessary, others are natural but unnecessary. And there are desires that are neither natural nor necessary. Natural and necessary. Friends, fame, freedom, power, thought about main sources of anxiety, death, illness, poverty, superstition. Food, shelter, and clothes. Natural but unnecessary. Banquets and servants, fish and meat. Neither natural nor necessary. A grand house and private baths. Crucial for those unable to make afraid of losing money. Epicurus's tripartite division suggested that happiness was dependent on some complex psychological goods, but relatively independent of material ones, beyond the means required to purchase some warm clothes, somewhere to live, and something to eat. A set of priorities designed to provoke thought in those who had equated happiness with the fruition of grand financial schemes and misery with a modest income. To plot the Epicurean relation between money and happiness on a graph, money's capacity to deliver happiness is already present in small salaries and will not rise with the largest. We will not cease being happy with greater outlay, but we will not, Epicurus insisted, surpass levels of happiness already available with those on limited income. Relation of happiness to money for someone with friends, freedom, etc. Level of happiness, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Level of money, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the level 4 seemed to level off. It didn't. Well, level of money was 1 and 2. Their happiness was 2 and 3. But 2, 3 was actually, they were happier than, looks like, level 4. And no one was level 5. It's wrapped around, so it's hard to tell. So level 4. So after you reach level 2, 2, 3, and 4 have the same level of happiness, he's saying. The analysis depended on a particular understanding of happiness. For Epicurus, we are happy if we're not in active pain. Because we suffer active pain if we lack nutrients or clothes. We must have enough money to buy them. But suffering is too strong a word to describe what will occur if we are obliged to wear an ordinary cardigan rather than cashmere one, or to eat a sandwich rather than sea scallops. Hence the argument that plain dishes offer the same pleasure as a luxurious table, when the pain that comes from want is taken away. Whether we regularly eat elaborate or simple meals, it cannot be the decisive factor in our state of mind. As for eating meat, it relieves neither any of our nature's stress, nor desire whose non-satisfaction will derive to pain. What it contributes to is not life's maintenance, but variation of pleasures, like drinking of exotic wines, all of which our nature is quite capable of doing without. It may be tempting to attribute the disparagement of luxury to the primitive range of products available to the rich in the undeveloped economy of Hellenistic Greece. Yet the argument may still be defended by pointing to an imbalance in the ratio of price to happiness in products of later ages. We would not be happy with the expensive vehicle on the left, but no friends, with the villa, but no freedom, with linen sheets, but too much anxiety to sleep. So long as essential non-material needs are unattended, the line on the graph of happiness remains stubbornly low. So here, it just goes from levels 1 to 2. Happiness to money. Someone who does not have friends or freedom, so their happiness level doesn't go above 2. To avoid acquiring what we do not need, amount of money spent in your happiness. To avoid acquiring what we do not need nor regretting what we cannot afford, we should ask rigorously at the moment we desire an expensive object whether we are right to do so. We should undertake a series of thought experiments. We need to imagine ourselves projected in time to the moment when our desires have been realized in order to gauge our likely degrees of happiness. The following method of inquiry must be applied to every desire. What will happen to me if what I long for is accomplished? What will happen if it's not accomplished? A method which, though no examples of it survive, may have followed at least 5 steps, which may, without injustice, be sketched in the language of an instruction manual or recipe book. 1. Identify a project for happiness. In order to be happy on a holiday, I must live in a villa. 2. Imagine a project that the project may be false. Look for exceptions to the supposed link between desired object and happiness. Could one possess the desired object but not be happy? Could one be happy but not have the desired object? Could I spend money on a villa and still not be happy? Could I be happy on a holiday and not spend as much money on a villa? If an exception is found, the desired object cannot be necessary and sufficient cause of happiness. It is possible to have a miserable time in a villa, for example, if I feel friendless and isolated. It is possible for me to be happy in a tent if, for example, I am with someone I love and feel appreciated by. In order to be accurate about producing happiness, the initial project must be nuanced to take the exception into account. Insofar as I can be happy in an expensive villa, this depends on being with someone I love and feel appreciated by. I can be happy without spending money on a villa, as long as I'm with someone I love and feel appreciated by. 5. True needs may now seem very different from the confused initial desire. Happiness depends more on the possession of a congenial companion than a well-decorated villa. Why then, if expensive things cannot bring us remarkable joy, are we so powerfully drawn to them? Because of an error similar to that of the migraine sufferer who drills holes in the side of his head of his skull. Because expensive objects can be like pleasurable solutions to needs we don't understand. Objects mimic in a material dimension that we require in a psychological one. We need to rearrange our minds, but are lured towards new shelves. We buy a cashmere cardigan as a substitute for the counsel of friends. We are not solely to blame for our confusions. Our weak understanding of our needs is aggravated by what Epicurus termed the idle opinions of those around us, which do not reflect the natural hierarchy of our needs, emphasizing luxury and riches, seldom friendship, freedom and thought. The prevalence of idle opinion is no coincidence. It is in the interest of commercial enterprises to skew the hierarchy of our needs, to promote a material vision of the good and downplay an unsaleable one. And the way we are enticed is through the sly association of superfluous objects with our other forgotten needs. It may be a Jeep we end up buying, but as it was for Epicurus, freedom what we were looking for. It may be the aperitif we purchased, but it was for Epicurus friendship that we were after. It may be fine bathing accoutrements we acquire, but it was for Epicurus thought that would have brought us calm. To counteract the power of luxurious images, Epicureans appreciated the importance of advertising. In the AD 120s, the central marketplace of Oinanda, a town of 10,000 inhabitants in the southwest corner of Asia Minor, an enormous stone colonnade 80 meters long and nearly 4 meters high was erected and inscribed with Epicurean slogans for the attention of shoppers. Luxurious foods and drinks in no way produce freedom from harm and a healthy condition in the flesh. 2. One must regard wealth beyond what is natural and is of no more use than water to a container that is full to overflowing. 3. Real value is generated not by theaters and baths and perfumes and ointments, but by natural science. The wall had been paid for by Diogenes, one of Oinanda's wealthiest citizens, who had sought 400 years after Epicurus and his friends had opened the garden in Athens to share it with his fellow inhabitants the secrets of happiness, which he had discovered in Epicurus' philosophy. As he explained on one corner of the wall, Diogenes, having already reached the sunset of my life and almost being on the verge of departure from the world on account of old age, I wanted, before being overtaken by death, to compose a fine anthem to celebrate the fullness of pleasure, and so help now those who are well constituted. Now, if only one person, or two or three or four or five or six, were in a bad predicament, I should address them individually. But as the mass majority of people suffer from a common disease, as in a plague, with their false notions about things, and their number is increasing, for in mutual emulation they catch the disease from each other like sheep, I wish to use this stoa to advertise publicly medicines that bring salvation. The massive limestone wall contains some 25,000 words advertising all aspects of Epicurus's thought, mentioning the importance of friendship and the analysis of anxieties. Inhabitants shopping in the boutiques of Oinanda, Oinoanda, like Ohio, Oioanda, had been warned in detail that they could expect little happiness from the activity. Advertising would not be so prevalent if it was not such suggestible creatures. We want things that are beautifully presented on walls and lose interest when they are ignored or not well spoken of. Lucretius lamented the way in which what we want is chosen by hearsay rather than the evidence of our own senses. Unfortunately, there is no shortage of desirable images in luxurious products and costly surroundings, fewer of ordinary settings and individuals. We receive little encouragement to attend modest gratifications, playing with the child, conversations with a friend, an afternoon in the sun, a clean house, cheese spread across fresh bread, send me a pot of cheese so that I may have a feast whenever I like. It is not these elements which are celebrated in the pages of Epicurean life. Well, art may help to correct the bias. Lucretius lent force to Epicurus's intellectual defense of simplicity by helping us in superlative Latin verse to feel the pleasures of inexpensive things. We find that the requirements of our bodily nature are few indeed, no more than is necessary to banish pain, and also to spread out many pleasures for ourselves. Nature does not periodically seek anything more gratifying than this, not complaining if there is no golden images of youths on the house, which are holding flaming torches in their right hands to illuminate banquets that go long into the night. For what does it matter if the hall doesn't sparkle with silver and gleam with gold, and no carved and gilded rafters ring to the music of the lute? Nature doesn't miss these luxuries. When people can recline in the company of the soft grass by a running stream under the branches of a tall tree and refresh their bodies pleasurably at a small expense. Better still if the weather smiles on them and the season of the year stipples the green grass with flowers. It is hard to measure the effect of commercial activity in the Greco-Roman world of Lucretius's poem. It is hard to know where the shoppers is in Oinoanda discovered discovered what they needed and ceased buying what they didn't because of the giant advertisement in their midst. But it is possible that a well-mounted Epicurean advertising campaign would have the power to precipitate global economic collapse, because for Epicurus, most businesses stimulate unnecessary desires in people who fail to understand their true needs. Levels of consumption would be destroyed by greater self-awareness and appreciation of simplicity. Epicurus would not have been perturbed. What measured by the natural pursuit of life, poverty is a great wealth, limitless wealth, great poverty. It points us to a choice. On the one hand, societies which stimulate unnecessary desires but achieve enormous economic strength as a result. And on the other hand, Epicurean societies which would provide for essential material needs but could never raise living standards behind subsistence level. There would be no mighty monuments in an Epicurean world, no technological advances, and little incentive to trade with distant continents. A society in which people were more limited by their needs would also be one of few resources, and yet, if we were to believe the philosopher, such a society would not be unhappy. Lucretius articulated the choice. In a world without Epicurean values, mankind is perpetually the victim of a pointless and futile martyrdom, fretting away life in fruitless worries through failure to realize what limit is set to acquisition and the growth of genuine pleasure. But at the same time, it is this discontent that has driven life steadily onward, out to the high seas. We can imagine Epicurus' response. However impressive our venues are on the high seas, the only way to evaluate their merits according to the pleasure they inspire. It is to pleasure that we have recourse, using the feeling as our standard for judging every good. And because an increase in the wealth of societies seems not to guarantee an increase in happiness, Epicurus would have suggested that the needs which expensive goods cater to cannot be those on which our happiness depends. Happiness and acquisition list. 1, a hut. 2, friends. 3, to avoid superiors' patronization in fighting and competition. 4, thought. 5, a reincarnation of Giovanni Bellini's Madonna from the Galleria della Accademia in Venice, whose melancholy expression would belie a dry sense of humor and spontaneity, and who would dress a man in man-made fibers from the sales racks of modest department stores. For happiness is may be difficult to obtain, but the obstacles are not primarily financial. Epicurus, the Principal Doctrines. Also sometimes translated on the title Souverain Maximes, are a collection of 40 quotes from the writings of Epicurus that serve as a handy summary of his ethical theory. 1. A blessed and indestructible being has no trouble himself and brings no trouble upon any other being. So he is free from anger and partiality, and for all such things imply weakness. 2. Death is nothing to us, for that which has been dissolved into its elements experiences no sensations, and that which has no sensation is nothing to us. 3. The magnitude of pleasure reaches its limit in the removal of all pain. When such pleasure is present, so long as uninterrupted, there is no pain in either the body or the mind, or of both together. 4. Continuous bodily pain does not last long. Instead, pain, if extreme, is present in very short time. And even that degree of pain, which slightly exceeds bodily pleasure, does not last for many days at once. Diseases of long duration allow an excess of bodily pleasure over pain. 5. It is impossible to live a pleasant life without living wisely and honorably and justly. And it is impossible to live wisely and honorably and justly without living pleasantly. Whenever any one of these is lacking, when, for instance, a man is not able to live wisely, though he lives honorably and justly, it is impossible for him to live a pleasant life. In order to obtain protection from other men, 6, any means of attaining this end is a natural good. 7, some men want fame and status, thinking that it would make themselves secure against other men. In the life of such men were really secure, they would have attained a natural good. If, however, it is insecure, they have not attained the end by which nature's own prompting they originally sought. 8, no pleasure is a bad thing in itself, but the things which produce certain pleasures entail disturbances many times greater than the pleasures themselves. 9, if every pleasure had been capable of accumulation, not only over time, but also over the entire body, or at least over the principal parts of our nature, then pleasures would never differ from one another. Number 10, if the things that produce pleasures of profligate men really freed them from the fears of the mind concerning celestial and atmospheric phenomena, the fear of death, the fear of pain, and further they taught them to limit their desires, we should never have any fault to find with such persons, for they would be filled with pleasures from every source, and they would never have pain of body or mind, which is what is bad. 11, if we have ever been troubled by celestial atmospheric phenomena, not by fears or by death, nor by our ignorance of the limits of pain and desires, we should have had no need of natural science. 12, it is impossible for someone to dispel his fears about the most important matters if he doesn't know the nature of the universe and still give some credence to myths. So without the study of nature, there's no enjoyment of pure pleasure. Number 13, there is no advantage to obtaining protection from other men, so as long as we are alarmed by events above or below the earth in general, or by whatever happens in the boundless universe. Number 14, protection from other men, secured by some extent by the power to expel and by material prosperity, in its pure form comes from a quiet life withdrawn from the multitude. Number 15, the wealth required by nature is limited and easy to procure, but the wealth required by vain ideals extends to infinity. Number 16. Chance seldom interferes with the wise man. His greatest and highest interests have been, are, and will be directed by reason throughout his whole life. 17. The just man is most free from disturbance, while the unjust is full of the utmost disturbance. 18. Bodily pleasure does not increase when the pain of want has been removed. After that, it only admits of variation. The limit of mental pleasure, however, is reached when we reflect on the bodily pleasures and the related emotions, which used to cause the mind the greatest alarms. Number 19. Unlimited time and limited time afford an equal amount of pleasure if we measure the limits of that pleasure by reason. Number 20. The flesh receives as unlimited the limits of pleasure, and to provide it provides unlimited time. But the mind, intellectually grasping what the end and the limit of the flesh is, and banishing the terrors of the future, procures a complete and perfect life. And we no longer have any need of unlimited time. Nevertheless, the mind does not shun pleasure, and even when circumstances make death imminent, the mind does not lack enjoyment of the best life. 21. He who understands the limits of life knows that it is easy to obtain that which removes the pain of want and makes the whole life complete and perfect. Thus, he has no longer any need of things which involve struggle. 22. We must consider both the ultimate end and all clear sensory evidence to which we refer our opinions, for otherwise everything will be full of uncertainty and confusion. Number 23. If you fight against all your sensations, you will have no standard to which to refer, and thus by no means judging of those sensations which you claim are therefore false. 24. If you reject absolutely any single sensation without stopping to distinguish between opinion about the things awaiting confirmation and that which is already confirmed to be present, whether in sensation or in feelings or any application of intellect to the presentations, you will confuse the rest of your sensations by your groundless opinion, and so you will reject every standard of truth. If in your ideas based upon your opinion you hastily affirm as true all that awaits confirmation as well as that which does not, you will not avoid error, as you will be maintaining the entire basis for doubt in every judgment between correct and incorrect opinion. 25. If you do not on every occasion refer to each of your actions to the ultimate end prescribed by nature, but instead of this act of choice or avoidance turn to some other end, your actions will not be consistent with your theories. Number 26. All desires that did not lead to pain when they remain unsatisfied are unnecessary. But the desire is easily got rid of when the thing desired is difficult to obtain and the desires seem likely to produce harm. Number 27. Of all the means which wisdom requires to ensure happiness throughout the whole life, by far the most important is friendship. Number 28. The same conviction which inspires confidence that nothing we have to fear is eternal or even of long duration also enables us to see that in the limited evils of this life, nothing enhances our security so much as friendship. Number 29. Some of our desires are natural and necessary. Others are natural but not necessary, and others either are natural or necessary, but are due to groundless opinion. 30. Those natural desires which entail no pain when unsatisfied, though pursued with an intense effort, are also due to groundless opinion. And it is not because of their own nature that they are not got rid of, but because of man's groundless opinions. 31. Natural justice is a pledge of reciprocal benefit, to prevent one man from harming or being harmed by another. Number 32. Those animals which are incapable of making binding agreements with one another, not to inflict nor suffer harm, are without either justice or injustice. And likewise for those peoples who either could not or would not form binding agreements not to inflict nor suffer harm. 33. There never was such a thing as absolute justice, but only agreements made in mutual dealings among men, in whatever places at various times providing against the infliction or suffering of harm. Number 34. Injustice is not an evil in itself, but only in consequence of the fear which is associated in the apprehension of being discovered by those appointed to punish such actions. This is not an evil. 35. It is impossible for a man who secretly violates the term of an agreement not to harm or be harmed to feel confident that he will remain undiscovered, even if he has already escaped 10,000 times, for until his death he is never sure that he will not be detected. Number 36. In general, justice is the same for all, for it is something found mutually beneficial in men's dealings. But in its application to particular places or their circumstances, the same thing is not necessarily just for everyone. Number 37. Among the things held to be just by law, whatever is proved to be of advantage. In men's dealing has the stamp of justice, whether it not be of the same for all. But if a man makes a law and it does not prove to be mutually advantageous, then it is no longer a just law. And if what is mutually advantageous varies and only for a time corresponds to our concept of justice, nevertheless for that time it is just for those who do not trouble themselves about empty words, but look simply at the facts. 38. Where without any change in circumstances, the things held to be just by law are not seen to correspond with the concept of justice in actual practice, such laws are not really just, but wherever the laws have ceased to be advantageous because of a change in circumstances, in that case, the laws that were for a time just when they were advantageous for the mutual dealings of the citizens, and subsequently ceased to be just when they were no longer advantageous. 39. The man who best knows how to meet external threats makes into one family all the creatures he can. And those he cannot, he at any rate does not treat as aliens. And where he finds even this impossible, he avoids all dealings. And so far as is advantageous, excludes them from his life. 40. Those who possess the power to defend themselves against threats by their neighbors, being thus in possession of the surest guarantee of security, live the most pleasant life with one another, and their enjoyment of the fullest intimacy is such that if one of them dies prematurely, the others do not lament his death, as though it called for pity.